This is a 1/16th scale replica of the children's book author Roald Dahl's writing cottage, which is on the back property of 8 acres behind his former home in Great Missenden, which is northwest of London. He asked a contractor to build it to the same outside dimensions as Dylan Thomas's writer's shed, which he had visited in Wales on close to the coast. Dylan Thomas's shed was an appropriated structure. It was wood frame, uninsulated, and Dahl was taken by the size of it. Dahl's is made of brick, of course. He worked with the curtains drawn, and it was built as a place he could get away and concentrate, get away from the distractions of the home, get away from the psychic distractions of the town and everything else. It still exists. It's in very bad condition. There's an effort to restore it, but I don't think that's going to happen because the cost is really high. The furniture and other relics were removed quite some time ago and repositioned in the Roald Dahl Museum and Interpretive Center. The Roald Dahl people were helpful, sending me some drawings and some dimensions or some confirmations of dimensions so that I could work off the images I found online and by proportion and comparison get pretty close to the actual size of it because I can't travel to Great Britain. This is a 1/16th scale replica of Dorothy Day's getaway cottage in Spanish Camp section of Staten Island. It's right on the water. It was right on the water. It was torn down in 2001 under some controversy. There was some development going on and there was an effort to have it declared historical, but the contractor lost his patience and bulldozed it, so that story's done. Dorothy Day is most known for co-founding the Catholic worker movement with Peter Morin, which was a poverty advocacy outfit. She had an incredibly interesting life, as all of the people whose cottages I built had. And she was a controversial figure, sometimes accused of being a Marxist, which she denied. She was just an advocate for the underrepresented and the poor. She was an early suffragette. Long before her conversion to Catholicism, she was drinking buddies with Eugene O'Neill and circulated with a lot of other luminaries of the time. For her efforts as a suffragette, she was actually arrested, imprisoned, and beaten along with a group of other people because they wouldn't cooperate with the charges against them, insisting that they were political activists, not criminals. She lived to be quite an age, and there are images of her standing down sheriff's deputies, advocating for the harvest, the grape harvest people with Cesar Chavez out in California. Some people who knew her were also very helpful, along with the Roald Dahl people, as well as the Dylan Thomas people and Virginia Woolf, in sending photographs and measurements and reminiscences. A couple who knew Dorothy Day sent contact principled snapshots. They described the interior. And that was a lot of help because there are only 3 or 4 images available online. These are a series of 7. Dorothy Day's is only a couple of months old. Dahl's and all the other 5 I built about 3 years ago. That would be George Bernard Shaw, St. Vincent Millay, Thomas Merton's Hermitage, and a couple of others, Thoreau's cabin on Walden Pond. How it started was I had been thinking about doing writers' cottages specifically because years ago, the author of Botany of Desire, Michael Pollan, had written a book about the construction of his cottage called A Place of My Own, and I believe he wrote Botany of Desire in that cottage and probably much or all of his books since then. It's a dream of a lot of people who write professionally or otherwise to have a place where they can do that privately, just as visual artists like to have a private place. I needed to narrow down this group and qualify it. So I didn't include any living authors or writers, because there are very many writers still living who have some pretty nice sheds. And I started to also bleed away from the edges of it a little bit. This is not specifically a structure where Day did her writing. She probably did some of her writing in her car because she liked to drive. She might have done a lot of it on the road and some of it at the offices of Worker. But it was a place where she spent time. It was important to her. That portion of Staten Island, she spent decades there off and on in various iterations of her life. I have started work on Zora Neale Hurston's home, which is a full-time residence in Florida. And it's very similar, almost identical in size to Thomas Merton's, and they're both concrete block structures, painted white. Merton's has a front sitting porch, hers does not. The fact that they were made of CMUs made the research easy because that's a standard unit of measure, generally 15.5 by 7.5. So as I could go around the images I found online, I could measure them. And I was lucky in that I found a YouTube video that someone had shot where they had, a pilgrim had walked in with a group of people and had done a walking tour of the interior of Merton's. So I had the concrete block in there to measure doors and windows and heights of the mantle and so forth. Because since it had so many windows, I had to build an interior for it. There's no interior for Roald Dahl's. He worked, fortunately for me, he worked with the curtains closed, so that saved me doing the interior. I had to do an interior for this edition on Days because the windows are so large. I'm going to do those two more, Virginia Woolf and Zora Neale Hurston, maybe one more, and then I'm going to look around to decide whether that's enough. I'm overstaying my welcome on these projects. The work I'm previously known for is similar. It's also reduced scale work of vacant spaces. In that case, in this situation where the spaces are set for future activity or are relics of past activity. These are all, of course, relics of past activity. I'm a little bit interested in the idea that I took these spaces, these sites, and by reducing them in scale, put them into a situation where they're both a site and a relic. My object is a relic, but it's a depiction of a site. I've always been interested in sites of vacancy. As a kid, I spent a fair amount of time walking through old buildings in the woods that had been vacant forever, that nobody cared about anymore. I've heard it said that there are people who are interested in action and event, and there are people who are interested in site and object. And I'm a site and object person. I never played any sports, but I find baseball diamonds interesting. I find sporting fields interesting when they're vacant. The potential of activity and the document of activity is interesting to me. In the case of these and the others in the series, the activity was specific, although not particularly known. And I've not read much of the writings of these people. I did read Seven Story Mountain by Merton. I probably read Pygmalion in high school. I will get to the writings of these people when I can, but I'm busy researching their structures and in the process finding out a lot of interesting things about all of these people. And there's controversy around a lot of these people. And that's part of what's interesting to me. You don't see it in the structures, but I try to title them subtly, thinking that maybe it will bring interested people to it, because if they see the title, they can go and do the research and they can find out about the people. And then that way I'm not putting in any opinion of my own. I'm trying to remain a removed observer.